Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Political Fixer Live. I am your host this evening, Shawna Presley Vercher. Welcome so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. Hello to all of you that are just hopping on. We have so much ground to cover. It is difficult to believe that it has only been 7 days since I've been with you last. I know that we do this every week on Political Fixer Live, but I don't know about you. This last week has felt like a month's worth of news has happened. I cannot keep up with everything, but I'm going to do my best to bring you some of the top stories that I believe are the most influential that you care about. And then, of course, I'm going to be asking for all of you to join in on the conversation as well. All right, let's see here. If you are joining us on TikTok at Political Fixer, welcome. You are welcome to dive in and add your comments, questions, thoughts, all of that good stuff in the chat. And our team is definitely going to be helping you along the way to make sure that we get all of that. I'm setting up the computer now to make sure that I have access to YouTube and Substack. So welcome to any of our YouTube Political Fixer audience and our Substack Political Fixer audience. And then thank you especially to our Political Fixer team. We have been hard at work this week. There's a lot happening. Let me tell you what we're going to dive into for our top 3 stories this evening. We don't often repeat stories week to week. Usually there is so much happening, the volume of stories hitting us, but this one hasn't gone away. In fact, if anything, it is getting curiouser and curiouser. We are going to be giving you an update on what happened with the Epstein scandal, why this will not go away, and how does this man's ghost now have control over the highest halls of power within our government. Lots happening with that. I'm going to tell you why you should care. Definitely more than gossip involved in this. Plus, a legend of late night received his walking papers. Stephen Colbert was informed, along with his staff, crew, writers, etc., over 200 people in total, that the top rated late night show would no longer be airing after May. Was it a financial decision, or was there something more sinister and possibly illegal at play with that decision? And we also have first, some questions on immigration. How much money would it take for you to participate in what might become one of the largest human rights violations of our generation? How much money would it require for you to participate in what's happening right now with the ICE detentions? Well, we have some numbers and some price tags on what the detention center in the Everglades is costing, and some of this you absolutely will not believe. But here's the shiny light. We've got some positive glimmers on this story. We like to leave you with positivity. There's some hopeful elements to it, but also there's a call to action. So we're actually going to be able to dive into this ICE detention story, and I'm going to give you some homework if you're so inclined. So this is a situation that if it is safe for you, if you're not driving, and if you're somewhere where you can, this might be a good opportunity for you to get something that you can take notes on. Your phone, if you're not watching me on your phone, or grab a scrap of paper or a paper towel. Here's why, because we're going to give you a lot of names in this next segment that you might want to remember. And then if I could ask my chief of staff, Sarah, to help guide me in my own schedule, I'm going to do my best to follow this up with a Substack article that has everything in one place. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you. Sarah's leading things off as usual, welcoming everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to our Political Fixer family that's on here regularly. We so appreciate you. I see that we're just getting started and we already have 2,000 likes. You know how we love the love. We definitely don't get enough of it in our daily reading of the news. So anytime you can go on there and show us appreciation, the team and I definitely appreciate it ourselves. And I want to say hi to to Square Foot Gardening and Professor Liberty Esquire. I want to give a special shout out to. She's actually counseling me on a big project that we're going to be revealing to all of you at some point over the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited about that. And then also I see Nev on here. So great. I appreciate you as well, Nev. We've got so many of our Political Fixer family. So let's not keep you waiting. Hi, Barbara C. Hi, Cindy. And I see Purple. Let's see. I thought I saw someone new. Purple. It goes so fast. I see Sheila123. Lots of roses. Punky's on here. Thank you so much. All right. So Sarah, Joe Eclectic is Sarah wants me to make sure I say hi to Joe as well. So the names go so fast, everyone. Okay. So let's get going with the news stories. Let's start with immigration. So this story, you know how I love a twist and a turn in a story. And I'm telling you, it was 7:30 this evening. I was sitting down to a late dinner with my family, and my husband's like, so what's the twist this week? I'm like, I don't have one. I've just got the news, but it's, lots to sink our teeth into. This is the latest in show prep that I have ever had the plot twist. You guys know how I love a plot twist. So at about 8:15, the plot twist appeared, and it comes in this story. So stick with me here. Let's see what we've got. Let's start out with the immigration story. Overall, we're going to talk about the money first. And this is where you're going to want something to take notes with, or you're going to want to have your notebook handy. How much money would it take for you to participate in what's happening right now? And I'm asking that sincerely, because if someone offered you $1,000 to look the other way, would you? Would you take $10,000 to participate and work at one of these facilities? Would you take $1 million to help build one of these facilities? That is one of the questions of the hour. And if you say to yourself, no amount of money is worth it, then let me tell you what it's costing you anyway as taxpayers. All right. Let's start first with a story that was broken by the Miami Herald. Now, again, we regularly criticize legacy media. We're going to do it again with the Stephen Colbert story in just a bit, but I love to shout out the media that is just doing the work and getting it right. And for tonight's programming, we definitely utilized the Mississippi Free Press, the Guardian, some PBS reporting, the Miami Herald. So it's important to remind everyone that not everyone is letting us down right now. Sarah, I also want to let you know, sorry to do this on live air, but the comments on YouTube and Substack are not coming through. So if we get any comments on there, if you could put them on the producer document, that would be great. All right, just a bit of business. Okay, so I hate using the name of this, but just so we're all clear, it's the place that they refer to as Alligator Alcatraz that we're talking about here. I'm going to call it the Everglades detention camp, which is the kindest thing that I could possibly say about it. I have my own opinions on it, but we're going to try to remain factual here rather than opinionated, because you guys know how sassy I can get. So this is estimated. This one facility is estimated to be annually $450 million. $450 million for this one detention center in the middle of the Everglades. What does that work out to? That works out to $245 per day for every single person who is detained there. Every bed that is filled with a human, $245. Think about the hotels that you stay in when you travel. $245 a night is a pretty decent hotel, and yet we're spending it on a plot of used runway in the middle of the Everglades swamp so that we can torture people. That's essentially what we're doing, right? Now, the question is, who's building it? And this is where I'm going to give you some insight and information. And I want to thank everybody for sharing the live and all of you joining us. Here's what I suggest. I suggest that the government sometimes feels like we're not getting through to them. I think we are, but that's another conversation for later in the show. But you know who's easier to get through to? These smaller companies, their owners, their shareholders, their other customers. And they don't want you to know that they are taking these millions of dollars to help facilitate this detention center and all of the horrors that go on inside of it. So I'm going to give you the names. Now, the Miami Herald broke this story, and the state of Florida then pulled down the names and the bids and the contracts once they found out people had them. They do not want you having this information. So I'm going to give you as much information as I can in this program, and then I'm going to follow up with a Substack article. So find me on Substack after this, or I'll try to post something as well so that we can reach out to them. Okay, if you are so inclined, and we'll review some things that you can say in just a bit. All right, here's our list. There is a company called Longview International Technology Solutions. I'm going to say that again, Longview International Technology Solutions. They are based in Herndon, Virginia. Herndon, Virginia. They are receiving $36.8 million for fencing and road construction. They also do geological surveys and civil engineering, which means they have other business clients that they service. So I suggest that we contact Longview International Technology Solutions, find out who their other customers are, and see if they like doing business with these people. That's what I'm suggesting if you are so inclined. So that's one of them, Longview International Technology Solutions. The second one, Gotham's LLC, as in the Batman City, but plural. Gotham's, Gothams. They are based in Austin, Texas. They are a disaster response company, and they received $21 million for IT infrastructure in the swamp, used for the little wristbands to track all of the people that they're torturing. You know, the ones that they're not telling us who they are or where they are or how long they're going to be there. We paid $21 million to not know anything about these people. So bang up job to Gotham's LLC in Austin, Texas. If they do IT infrastructure, I guarantee you they have other business clients and they have shareholders or an ownership board. Texas-based Garner Environmental Services, and a second company, so Garner, Garner, Environmental Services, and SLSCO Limited, I don't know who they are. They each got nearly $20 million. Both of these Texas companies received $20 million of taxpayer money each to provide build out and maintenance of this facility. So these are Texas-based companies, Garner Environmental Services and SLSCO. And I'll do as much digging as I can before the Substack article. All right, here we go. Let's keep going. There's a few more. CDR Healthcare, that's Charlie Delta Robert. CDR Healthcare and CDR Companies received $18 million in contracts to provide security guards and then a medical unit at the facility. Now, this is something I found really interesting. So you get paid to beat the crap out of them, and then you get paid to treat them. How much is this racket going for? $418,000 per day to keep the medical side of things going. So who is CDR Health Company? No one seems to know, but they are a subsidiary of CDR Companies. Let's do some digging, interweb family. Let's find out who they are. Then there's a Mississippi relief company, an emergency relief company called Granny's Alliance Holding. They received over $3 million for feeding them, the people that are being detained, providing food services. And this one is real. I had to look it up. There is a St. Pete company called Duty Calls, Doodie, Duty Calls, for sanitation, $22 million. What other concerts do they provide sanitation services for? What other festivals that are paid by city and municipal tax dollars? They're based in St. Petersburg, Florida. Who are they? Who are their other customers? And how can we make sure that people are aware of what they are facilitating? So we're talking about contractors that are participating and profiting from the detention center in the Everglades. We've talked about calling your congressperson. What if we called the people that are enabling all of this and profiting from it, which arguably might be a bit worse on the morality scale, right? So the Duty Calls is getting paid $22 million. And there's another fun one. It's a small number, but a little fun gift here is that IRG Global Management, they made a bunch of donations days before to the Florida Republican Party, and lo and behold, they got a $2.9 million contract for transportation services. That's lobbying well done, folks, or bribery well done, I guess. IRG Global Management, I'm assuming based in Florida. Okay, here's the thing. We've talked about this from a company perspective. How do we find out who these people are? So usually state corporation, like corporate registrations, tell you about ownership structure. You can usually look up publicly if they have board members. There's usually public filings. You could go to their website and see if they have other clients listed. If you have access to a state government database that's in your area, particularly if you live in a blue city, state, or county that awards contracts to people, do some searches and see if these people are on it. And then find out, why are we paying people that are facilitating torture? That would be my recommendation. But let's make it a little bit more personal. We talked about what would you accept. When we talk about millions of dollars, such an insane number to many of us, but what would you take as far as money to participate in what's happening right now to other human beings? The single largest contract so far for this Everglades Detention Center goes to Critical Response Strategies. Their contract is $78 million, and it is to staff the facility. And right now, they have posted job postings on LinkedIn and Indeed for positions to work in a secure detention facility in a remote swamp-based area. So it's clearly this. And they are saying that the job, you have to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and you would be paid approximately $3,000 per week. So you're talking about a 6-figure job, and all you have to do is set any morals or scruples aside from anything that you might happen to witness when you are on said job. Critical Response Strategies. Would you take the job? Would you take the job? I know for some people money is tight, but the state does not want you to know who has these contracts. Now, who's paying for this? That's a fun thing. So Florida is just fronting the money, because if we know one thing about this sitting president, it's that he's excellent at paying his bills. And he's just basically wink, wink, nod, nod. We're going to pay you out of FEMA dollars later. So either way, FEMA, which is supposed to help us after natural disasters, Floridians are getting completely screwed, because either it's coming out of our budget and we're not getting paid back, or it's coming out of the FEMA budget and we're not getting help the next time a hurricane hits. Rhonda Wally says, talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. Absolutely. I want to thank Joe Eclectic, Punky, Kathy, Cat, and Robin for the gifts. Thank you so much. Before we keep going, there's a couple of other key points I want to tell you about this immigration story. We're going to pivot to a couple of other aspects of it. But what do you say when, someone offers you this job, especially if you're used to making $10, $12 an hour? Here, you can make a lot of money. All you have to do is look the other way. What do you do? What do you say? If you run a business and you're supposed to be making a profit, is all profit fair game? I mean, that's some of the questions we're being asked right now, right? So we're discussing, would you participate if the price was right or wrong, depending on your perspective and who's footing the bill, in what's happening with the detaining of immigrants. Okay, I want to say hi to HYD 5678. I got a notice that you achieved some sort of TikTok milestone, so thank you and welcome to Political Fixer Live. We are at already almost 19,000 likes. I want to keep going because I promised you a plot twist in this immigration story. I thought the money was insane. So I led with that, but let me tell you about a couple of other developments that are happening with the story before we pivot to some other current events. I want to start with something that I found to be somewhat heartwarming, I guess, in the slanted scale of things, the way the news is absolutely dumpster fire awful most of the time. If any of you have been following Andre Hernandez Romero, the gay makeup artist who was deported, kidnapped, detained, whatever you want to say, to El Salvador, Those of you that might loosely remember his name or his story, he was a young gentleman who came from Venezuela originally. He came here seeking asylum because he believed that he would, among other things, be persecuted because he is gay. And then when his head was shaved and he was knelt down in front of others, then the press reported him crying out for his mother. I believe that no one should be tortured, but in the scheme of things, that kind of broke my heart with this immigration story. His in particular, I've been following fairly closely. In particular, I've been following on Blue Sky, where loved ones of his have been posting photos of him every single day for the more than 100 days, that that man has been detained under unknown circumstances. And we did not know until recently if he was even alive. Well, the positive news is that Andre, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his name, it's spelled Andry, he's not only alive, he has been released from El Salvadorian custody. All right, we've got a lot to talk about here. There's so much happening. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about how this happened. So he was not released to the United States, but he is alive, and his family and his lawyer and his team have confirmed that he is, mental and physical abuses aside, in reasonably good health. He was released to Venezuela. Now, how did that happen? This is the story that you're going to want to buckle up for. All right, there was a bit of a triangle that happened here, all right, where El Salvador received, and I want to just make sure I get this correctly, El Salvador received $6 million from the United States government that we know of to take and torture these men who are migrants, many of them who are seeking asylum, and most of them we now know had absolutely zero criminal charges. Now, let me explain something about how terribly run this thing was and how just awful and dark this was. One of the reasons they detained Andre Hernandez Romero is because they said that he had gang tattoos. His tattoos, one of them literally says mom, and the other literally says dad in English. Just for the record, 3-letter words that even this president should be able to read. And then he had crowns over each of them, because partly to show and celebrate the Three Kings celebration that is known in his homeland, he said, and then also because he worked as a makeup artist in beauty pageants. Okay, they took this kid and they tortured him because of his gang tattoos. That's how ridiculous this got, right? Well, El Salvador got paid, at least that we know of, $6 million to detain and do with what they wanted. All right. Well, then the Venezuelan government stepped in and they said, we would like to get these people back. Thank you very much. If you're not going to keep them in the United States, we will take them in Venezuela. What did the United States get in return? Because this deal did happen, and a number of people, we believe around 200, were transferred from El Salvador to Venezuela. Not ideal for some of them because they believed they might be prosecuted or persecuted, but at least they weren't being actively tortured. What did the United States get in exchange for this? To understand that, I want to tell you the story of one man that most of us have never heard of before, but I intend to make a bigger deal. Bear with me for just a second because this is where the twist pops in. All right. His name is Dahoud Hanid Ortiz. I'm going to spell that for you, but don't cheat by Googling. All right. Dahoud is D-A-H-U-D, Hanid, H-A-N-I-D, Ortiz, O-R-T-I-Z. Dahoud Hanid Ortiz. I'm just going to refer to him as Mr. Ortiz for the sake of this. And for those of you who are new to Political Fixer, this is where I tell you a story of a plot and a twist that maybe you didn't see coming, which is how sinister our current government is. Okay, so Mr. Ortiz was born in Venezuela in 1970. He then became a dual U.S.-German citizen and denounced his Venezuelan citizenship. He then joined the U.S. Marines. Now, why am I telling you the story of Mr. Ortiz? Well, he served in Korea and Iraq. He earned a Purple Heart, but he was later dishonorably discharged for a number of reasons, not the least of which was falsifying documents to gain more benefits. But here's where it gets a little spicy, as the kids say. In 2016, Mr. Ortiz stormed a law office in Madrid, Spain, seeking revenge against a lawyer that was involved with his ex-wife. And I assume that he means involved with his ex-wife. He couldn't find the attorney, so he just murdered the women that were working in the law office at the time. Okay. He then set the office on fire in Madrid and fled. He fled to Germany. He was then returned to Venezuela, and then he was arrested. Now, Spain said, hey, the crime happened here in Madrid. Give him to us. And Venezuela was like, no, we're keeping him. Well, what did the United States get whenever they made this little triangle of a deal where they paid El Salvador? El Salvador released a bunch of their prisoners slash the immigrants and asylum seekers to Venezuela. And then what did the United States get? We got 10 prisoners returned to U.S. soil, something that Marco Rubio celebrated as a great champion of freedom, and justice was finally served. And among them was Mr. Ortiz, because he's technically American now. So this guy who murdered women looking on a rampage for the attorney involved with his wife and then lit the office on fire is now on U.S. soil, waving to cameras and completely free. Well done, Justice America. Well done. What? That's what we got. 10 of those types of prisoners. How do we know this? How do we know it was done on purpose? Because the Venezuelan justice minister, his name is Diosdado Cabello, he says, we handed over some murderers for you. They did it on purpose. They stuck us with their murderers. Yeah, I am astounded. I report on this stuff all the time. You guys know. And I'm like, how are we this bad at this? Like, how are we this dumb as a government? We negotiated to get more murderers. Just all else aside, human rights, due process, the, racial prejudice and bias, all of these things, set it all aside. We were told that the reason this is happening with the immigrants was to keep the crime out of the country, that they were violent and we needed to get them out. Problematic at best, but that was the reason we were given. And so now we're paying a lot of money to get rid of people who are gay makeup artists so that we can then have new murderers walking free. Well done. Well done. Well done. All right. Red Dog, is it ate it? Oh, that's funny. He says, I hope you make a video so I can repost. I am going to try to make a video about this. Yeah. I mean, just forgive the lack of maybe grace that I told that story, because it came to me very late before we hit the air, but I did double source it. Most of the articles about it are still in Spanish. This is new breaking news because they're still sorting through who got whom and what the situation is. I want to do just one other quick thing to wrap this story up. I want to tell you that Venezuela, since receiving the migrants back into their country from El Salvador that the U.S. banished there, they are officially launching a human rights investigation because of the alleged mistreatment of the people that were staying in El Salvador. Now, this is likely to get very ugly because Venezuela's head and El Salvador's head apparently really don't like each other. And so this is a chance for them to kind of do a war by proxy, just both for public opinion and also to try to siphon resources in favor from other countries. So I would look for Venezuela to stay on top of this. I'm not pro-Venezuelan government. So for those of you that are familiar with what's been happening there, that's not what I'm saying. I understand they're not exactly people with clean hands. But at this point, anyone that will shine a light on these human rights abuses, I would at least like to amplify the fact that it's happening. So that is Venezuela saying that they're going to launch things. If you would like, how is all of this doing, right? Sure, we're ruining people's lives and it's costing us $1 bazillion at all these different exchanges of cash in different countries and now in the Everglades, and we're bringing more murderers in than we're bringing out. But, how's it doing with the polling, which is what any politician is going to ask themselves, which is how we got into this mess to begin with. The question is, how is it doing with the polling? And the answer is not great. I'm going to give you a couple of quick numbers. So this is the one that got me. Okay, so this is USA Today did a story on recent numbers. This is a recent story. This is as of yesterday. These numbers are fresh. 58% of Americans disapprove of the way that 47 is doing his job overall. That is a shift of negative 11 points. And for perspective, it is lower on his approval rating than any other modern president in recorded history. As far as immigration specifically, according to a recent Gallup poll, only 35% of Americans, basically 1 in 3, approve of immigration, which used to be his strongest issue. Right now, 62% overall disapprove of how he's handling immigration. Out of those, 45%, 45 points of them strongly disapprove. 1 in 4 US adults say that they worry a lot or some that they or someone close to will be deported. That is terrifying and sad. And a record high from the time that they've been asking this question, 79% of all US adults now say that immigration is a good thing for the country. So stay for the insane amount of abuse and fraud. And I guess, come for the big amount of fraud and abuse, and then stay for the fact that you are losing handily on this issue. Just honestly, the worst run administration on every, it would be laughable if it wasn't so tragic and awful and mean. So if anything, he's just absolutely getting shellacked here. How bad is it? It's so bad that he needs to pick on one of your favorite late night comedians. And we're going to talk about what happened with that in just a second. But first, let's go again. Jan says, 79% like immigration overall. So what I mean by that, Jan, is not 79% like how he's handling it, but 79% of Americans now say that it's a good idea for America, which was founded on a land, being a land of immigrants. We should possibly keep doing that. We should actually continue to be a melting pot. And with all of the recent campaigning and bigotry and hate speech that's been happening, before a lot of people were saying, hey, let's close our borders. Maybe we don't need so many people that are different than us coming to this nation. And now 79% of people are saying actually immigration is a good thing. And that is a record high number compared to where we've ever been on immigration. Kind of sad when you think about it, again, with our history, but this is where we live. And so it's not just that they disapprove of how he's handling immigration. It's that he has somehow changed hearts and minds in the opposite direction of where he wanted. He and Stephen Miller and their ilk want us to hate all of the others, right? All of the people that don't look and sound like us, that come with different last names, etc. And yet, as a nation, we're coalescing in the other direction. All right, Danny's brother is asking, will the House ever vote to release the Epstein files? We will be talking about that shortly. There's some updates there. Jan says, we are all immigrants. That is true. I have a lot of indigenous blood in me, but still a healthy amount of Irish. Yeah, there's a lot to this. All right, let's see if we get here. So Barbara C., where do we draw the line between money and humanity? That is a great question. That's one of our topics of conversation. Like, is there an amount of money that makes this acceptable? If we were making money on torturing people, does that suddenly make it a good thing, right? But right now, millions of dollars are being cashed in on this. Kathy McGrath Walcott says, violence and due process, no. T. Kramer says, hearing this information, I would guess that 47 is getting money from the cartels that he claims he's against. There's a lot of rumors and some reporting that's being done on a secret deal involving cartel family members that were allowed access to the United States, even though they were known to have committed crimes. So we're looking into that, but I don't have substantiated information, but I would stick with your instincts there. Vivian says, I swear between Perriman and the news of the day, perimenopause and the news of the day, it's exhausting, but I'm trying to stay aware. Yeah. Kelly Frazier says, right is right, wrong is wrong. Hard no for me regarding taking an Alcatraz contract. It is exhausting. But you know what? We know what's going on. We are clearly making a difference by having these conversations and exposing the violence, the terror on communities, the lack of due process, the waste, fraud, and abuse. It's working. The American people are starting to become more aware, and they are starting to side more with reason. And so while it's exhausting, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge all of you who have taken the time to either create, like, or share content related to these very difficult topics, because it can sometimes feel depressing, it can sometimes feel futile, but at the same time, it's working and we're starting to see the numbers trend that way. Joe Eclectic is saying to Vivian, not alone, so many more nightmares for me, rough to sleep. Yeah, there's a lot of nightmares happening, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. Ash CCC says, thank you for discussing what's working, and to all who keep speaking and doing. Absolutely. It does sometimes feel overwhelming, but what you're doing is making a difference. And we know that certain things are starting to bother him. And one of them is the fact that we're not only not bowing to him, many people are not respecting him. And in the case of Stephen Colbert and his audience, they are laughing at him. And if there's one thing that a so-called strongman hates, it's people laughing at him. And that was put on full display this week. For those of you that many of you may have heard already, it was announced that Stephen Colbert's late night show would be canceled starting in May. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about this story because I think it's really important, and there's some things that you can do moving forward in the short and the long term. So let me tell you first a little bit about what happened. So CBS is owned by Paramount, and Paramount was saying that this was strictly a financial decision. Later on that week, after they said that they alluded that they were having money issues, then someone released a figure that says that CBS and Paramount are rumored to have lost around $40 million in revenue last year, which is shocking. Just to put some stuff in context, when you think about how much money trades hands in a studio and how many big productions they must have and what have you, to put into context this number that is absolutely the full 100% reason that Stephen Colbert was let go, unless you believe otherwise, $16 million of that was paid off to 47 to settle that lawsuit that he waged against 60 Minutes for misediting, so to speak, a Kamala Harris interview. So you're really worried about money, but you paid $16 million to a guy because of how you edited a news story. You have in-house attorneys. Fight it. Just drag your feet for 4 years. The guy, your time is limited. Why would you pay $16 million if you're short on cash? So that is red flag number one. But red flag number two is when you realize that right now, Paramount, the parent company of CBS, is looking to do a merger with a large media company called Skydance Media. Now, you might remember Skydance Media in some of the credits of some of the things that you watch, like the Top Gun franchise and Mission Impossible, and apparently anything else that Tom Cruise does. Just kidding. So that merger has one big step remaining. And it is that they need approval from the federal government. And what better way to get approval from the person leading this federal government than to honor the king with a gift of cash and a token head on a platter, so to speak? Is that what happened with Stephen Colbert? All right. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders certainly think so. They are calling for an investigation, saying that essentially if you paid him $16 million on a lawsuit that had no merit and you got rid of somebody who was bothering him, then that's considered a bribe. Also, the Writers Guild. The Writers Guild is demanding an investigation. They said that they have significant concerns because Stephen Colbert is a frequent critic of 47. And they say that they do believe that this was a bribe and not a financial decision. Part of it is that the late night show, I should say, was the #1 rated late night show on television across the board. Seems to me if you can't make money off of that, that maybe someone else needs to be fired at the corporate level, but what do I know? They released a statement that says that On July 15th, during a regular show of the late night of Stephen Colbert, Colbert went on air and called the settlement with 60 Minutes and CBS, quote, a big fat bribe. Less than 48 hours later, Paramount canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Draw your own conclusions. This again is the largest and most successful late night show on television as of now. They are currently calling on New York State Attorney, because the show and some of the corporate headquarters are in New York. They are asking New York State Attorney, the Writers Guild, Attorney General Letitia James, who you all recognize that name, I'm sure, to do an investigation for illegal business practices. They are also asking Governor Newsom and California to launch an investigation from that end targeting Paramount. So, excuse me one second. Almost over this cold. Almost had it. Excuse me. Okay, so why should you care? Apparently there's like some Darth Vader stuff happening where I don't get to tell you why you should care. Okay. So why should you care when a show like this gets canceled? First of all, Stephen Colbert is going to be fine. He is going to land somewhere else with another deal. His staff and his writers and all of them, maybe not. It's a pretty large team, hundreds of people. So if you want to support those people in the meantime, you can start watching the program now. You could start recording it or watching clips on YouTube. Maybe it's something you only watch every once in a while, but if you start watching it more regularly, that is going to jack up his ratings and hopefully give a new, bigger resume for these people to have a soft place to land. So that's something kind that you could do to help some strangers who are about to be out of work. But here's the bigger picture. And forgive me for the cough. The bigger picture is this. Stephen Colbert is an icon to many. He was on network television for years. Prior to that, he was on Comedy Central for years. He's the guy that stayed out of trouble. He's a family guy. Not that it should matter, but he's a faith-based man. He talks with relatively clean humor. All of these things that are supposedly going to make you accepted, right, by a certain ilk. And yet, he was taken down like that. He was lucrative. He was good at his job. He had the #1 show. He did everything by his professional standards that he was supposed to do. And yet it wasn't good enough to save him. How much money was he making that network? It didn't matter. So there's a couple of takeaways. #1, you cannot satisfy a bully. You cannot. You cannot satisfy the unreasonable demands of the people kissing up to the bully. You will never, ever, ever be good enough, right? Like if you do not bend the knee and completely kiss up to them at all times, it is never enough. So this should be a lesson to people that are trying to just kind of blend in and not rock the boat long enough. Right? Just wait out this administration. Don't take a position on any issue. Try not to get political. Nothing that you do is good enough if you're not actively participating in their nonsense. So he's a good lesson for that. For the rest of us, who many of you, you're on the Political Fixer Live right now, so you clearly are involved in these issues and you're clearly taking a stance on a lot of these issues. This should be a warning call to all of us that yet another legacy media outlet has toppled. And I'm not just talking about late night, but now you're talking about 60 Minutes being policed. You're talking about any CBS News programming decision, particularly editorially. You have to assume that they are now really minding their P's and Q's, so to speak. They are going to be sucking up. So that's after the the Washington Post and the New York Times. So what can you do about it? Now is the time to start curating and cultivating your sources for independent media. Maybe it's people that you follow on things like this, like Substack and YouTube and TikTok. Maybe it's smaller publications that are local. Maybe it's becoming more active on accounts like Blue Sky and others where you could start looking at what more journalists have to say. But the bottom line is we really are getting to the age that if we want more information, particularly about this administration, we're going to have to start finding it ourselves. So if any of you have publications, and we've talked about this before, we really do need to start curating a list so we can recommend each things to others. It could be an individual blog or a Substack article, but remember when I gave you the homework on looking into some of these contractors having to do with the Everglades detention camp, for those of you who just joined us? Well, I would say your second bit of homework is, can you start jotting down some of these independent outlets? Because we're going to be doing another series of videos and publishing what you guys come up with. And I would really like your gray matter on this, because I think that now more than ever, we know that voices are being silenced. We know that it's just going to get worse before it gets better. And if the almighty dollar is not even enough to save someone in corporate media, what chance does anybody else have? Right? So, Aaron Parnas does do a great job of reporting under the desk news. I love that. Midas Touch has been having some great programming. I also love Mueller She Wrote. I don't know if anyone, I know her handle is a bit outdated, but she does like a legal perspective on things. So Jan says 47 said he will get 20 million more after the 60 million is paid. He just heard that. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows what kind of schemes? We have a politics girl. Yes, absolutely. So please continue suggesting things. We're going to try to compile a list. And then for the political fixer team that's on here, if you're trying to keep track with me today, because I know it's been a day and a half of different stuff that's been developing in our neck of the woods, then please remind me to do the Substack article about the immigration costs and the contractors. We're going to do a posting about the plot twist on the murderer that we got back into our country. And we're going to start compiling a list of independent news outlets. I see that David Packman, I'm assuming, Jessica Craven, Danny Cook, love all of this. So, many on TikTok have an inside line to all the news on the administration. There's a lot of people that are doing really great posting, and we try to follow as many as we can. Don Lemon, I haven't seen him do stuff in a while. I'm honestly, visionary girl, I did not realize that he was still doing stuff. I'll have to take a look at it. All right, we're going to dive into one of the top stories this week that, again, did not think it would be the top story again. It's the Epstein story. And before we dive in to the salacious details of this week, and again, why you should care, this is more than gossip. There is definitely some stuff we need to talk about with justice and also with what's happening politically. Then Dawn is here on TikTok. Good to know. Okay, we are at already 47,000 likes this evening. We are definitely going to be on the air next week, Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we want to make sure that as many of you join us as possible. We've got a lot of different projects that we've been working on that we're hoping to start rolling out more with the summer hiatus. And again, I want to thank some of you who I've reached out to offline, IRL, as the kids say, to help us with some of these projects with your expertise. I know some of you reached out to us months ago and said, hey, I want to volunteer. Hey, I want to help. And we are starting to call some of you. Some of you are getting calls and messages from me, from Sarah, from a political fixer team member. Yes, they are real. It is us saying, hey, can we reach out to you? Will you help us with these projects? So definitely looking forward to diving in and hopefully giving you guys a glimpse as to what some of the stuff we've been working on. Okay. Before we dive into Epstein, Sassy Mamas is saying, can you touch on the Medicare, Medicaid cuts? Nonprofits are no longer getting funding. Okay. This is a really important question, Sassy Mamas, and I'm glad you brought it up. We've been talking so much about the more salacious news that we really haven't talked about the god-awful bill that they passed that's going to have so many different cuts in it. But there are 3 different types of cuts and ways that you might experience them that I want you to be prepared for. I'm going to give you a glimmer of silver lining at the end of this, but first we got to go a little bit dark. First of all, there are extensive Medicaid and Medicare cuts that were in this bill. However, because these people are just smart like Satan, I swear, then a lot of those cuts are set to not take effect until after the next midterm election, because they don't want to be held accountable for it right away, right? So for some people, they're not going to notice the issue until it's too late, unless we start talking to them about it, unless we start showing them that it passed and how this could impact them. So that's something really important to know. Yes, Sassy Mamas, we should definitely be talking about this with each other, but also to our outer circles and friends and social media groups, because otherwise they may not know what's about to hit them. So that's the first type of cut, is that direct cut that does not take effect until after the midterm elections by design. The second type of cut, however, is going to come from people who pay attention to this for a living. Hospitals, senior care facilities, maternity facilities, they know the cuts are coming. They've been following this. They're aware that their budgets are going to be impacted. Their businesses, they are paid to keep up with that. We are going to start seeing layoffs, short staffing, closures in some areas before the cuts become final, right? They're not going to wait until 2026 to make those cuts. Many of them are going to start making it now, okay? And so we're going to start seeing the impact to some of our health services happening there. But there's a third thing that's happening that I just want to briefly tell you that's very confusing, which is that the federal government, and this goes back to the early days of Elon Musk and Doge and all of that horror, right? They're just holding checks. They're just randomly holding checks and not letting them process through the system. And this is happening not just with Medicaid and Medicare, but it's happening with our military. It's happening with education money. It's happening where people in different foreign embassies are saying they're not getting paid. There's chaos in the payment system, and that is by design. And so some of that has nothing to do with the legislation. This money was committed, and yet they're just keeping it or moving it around or who knows what, right? We really don't have transparency there. So all of this to say, yes, the cuts are going to be bad. Now, what is the silver lining? I promised you silver lining. First of all, legislation can be reversed. I know how people feel about talking about midterms this early, but we flip Congress and we put pressure on those that we put into office, and these cuts can be reversed. It's just a pen and paper. They can do it. So keep that in mind as we move forward, that some of this can be reversed. Secondly, they're banking on the American people being fooled. They're banking on them not having the information they need when they cast their vote, and then being saying, haha, we tricked you, we're taking your money, we're taking your ability to get medicine or medical treatments or whatever the case might be, right? We get to help control that. We can start informing people right now. And that's going to be a big part of our collective responsibility. So I know it's hard to create content on something that might seem really confusing or kind of boring to some people, like budgets and bills and whatever, but I would encourage you all to consider making content that says, did you know if you're on Medicaid or Medicare, it could suddenly stop next year? Get people's attention and then inform them of what's happening. Right? KG brings up a good point. Hospitals plan for the long term. They can't work on a year-to-year swing. Sassy Mamas, you're welcome. Thank you for bringing it up. Catsmandu, I love that, says midterms are not that far away. User 4370 says, problem is until it happens, they won't believe. I think that's the case when we talk about a lot of social issues and we say, look at how bad it can get. But when you start saying, hey, your money might stop, I think you might have people's attention in a different way. We won't know till we try, right? It's going to be here before we know it. So that's Square Foot Gardening wants me to bring up the gerrymandering in Texas. Yes, absolutely. Listen, it's not going to be an easy load. I'm not saying it is. They are going to rig this game in every way they can think of. But the good news is that there's more of us than there are of them, and they are both greedy and stupid. So there's that. I just got to think that ultimately at some point we will win. But then I keep going back to that Spaceballs quote, good is dumb. Anyway, all right, let me give you a quick update on this Epstein situation. And let me tell you why I'm going to spend more time on this. We're, rounding out our third story this evening. There was a lot to cover. I know some of this got a little bit dark, but there is some empowerment here on what you can do. And I want to tell you that there's actually a little bit of a positive spin on a very dark story with what we're going to tell you. And again, we're going to keep this very PG. We are not getting into the details of anything here for those of you that might be listening with little ears. Let's talk about this Epstein case. The bottom line is that this has impacted the White House more than anything else we could have anticipated. When we talk about, if you were to tell me 6 months ago that someone would come into this administration, cause it to come to a grinding halt, for it to use every bit of tools at their disposal for distraction and diffusion, for them to change the media cycle and dominate it for several weeks. I would have hoped that you were talking about the Democratic Party, but alas, no. The thing that has done this to this administration is this Epstein case. And the reason must be because whatever is in there either impacts him directly or someone that he is concerned about directly for fear of his own person or because he owes them. Who knows? We could speculate till the cows come home. But the bottom line is it has sent shivers down his spine, and he does not balk easily. He is a narcissist. He believes that nothing ever will hurt him, and he has a life of lessons that have taught him exactly that. All of this stuff happens, it's someone else's fault. Get caught on an Access Hollywood tape, it just raises your ratings. Get caught violating campaign finance laws, you still get to be president. Get convicted of 47 felonies, we'll give you the presidency again. He has never faced consequences, and yet he's scared of a consequence. How scared is he? This is just a few of the kitchen sink things that came out since this Epstein file situation over the last several days. Number one, said that he was going to revoke Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship. No idea. I don't know if he had just watched A League of Their Own. I don't know what made that pop into his head. That woman has not been on the air for quite some time, and yet he wants to revoke her citizenship. So that was distraction technique one. He said that the Washington Commanders would not get funding for the stadium enhancements that they want to make unless they go back to being named the Washington Redskins. And while he was at it, the Cleveland baseball team needed to go back to the Cleveland Indians. Random, but okay, so he tried baiting us with sports nonsense, and then that didn't work. He released the MLK files involving the assassination. Okay, the family asked him not to because there's a lot of other stuff that I'm sure was released with those files having to do with the personal life of an icon, and his family members and the Martin Luther King Foundation said several times, please do not release this. He did it anyway. No one even noticed except for the family. I want to give a special shout out to Bernice King, who I only got to meet once briefly and we communicate occasionally, but she said, okay, great, now do the Epstein files. Gotta love the sass of that woman. Okay, he got people to try to look into the Clinton emails again. They issued a remark that the FBI may have bungled the first investigation. So definitely, if you're trying to contradict the most salacious, gossipy, tabloidy, mystery-driven sex scandal of a generation, emails will do it. Or not. He made up some sort of story about Obama and then issued some sort of graphic of him AI generated getting arrested and said that Tulsi Gabbard is going to lead a criminal investigation and they're going to arrest Obama. Even that didn't work. His supporters are like, what are you talking about? No one wants to talk about that guy. Also, small aside, not that it should matter and not that I want to give credibility to nonsense, but if President Obama did something that was illegal, according to your Supreme Court, sir, he would be covered because it's in his professional duty and he has immunity. So good luck with that. Okay, moving on. This is how bad it got. This is how much 47 wanted to distract from Epstein. He went to a doctor. He went to a real, didn't come from The Simpsons, has an actual medical degree, hasn't been barred from the actual medical association doctor, and released the results. That's right, at age 79, 49 allowed them to announce the fact that he has chronic venous insufficiency. And the condition occurs when your leg veins struggle to pump blood back to the heart, which causes your blood to pool and your legs to swell, and people were starting to notice. So while some are speculating that that might not be all of the health issues facing this current person, he at least went to a doctor and released medical stuff. Surely, since the Clinton flu dominated the headlines for 2 weeks, that this is going to work. Not even a blip. When I was preparing for the show, I almost forgot it happened. I had to go back through my outline. I'm like, oh, that's right. He does have some weird condition. Didn't matter. Everyone stayed on this. But here was the major thing. How do we know the Epstein thing has them completely shook? When you're passing legislation in Congress, there's a lot of little mundane, almost archaic rules that you have to go through. And one of them is that every single thing has to go through certain committees or it doesn't even get through the vote. Well, one of the things that happened this week is that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, canceled many of those committees because he did not want people voting on Epstein. By Tuesday, it was pretty much decided they were not going to move forward on any legislation. They were supposed to talk about immigration. There's more funding bills at play. They had a whole list of things, I'm sure none of them good, that they wanted to wreak havoc with in America. All of it was stopped. They shut down the entire House. It says, so they're going to head out for recess. Ted Lieu says they are ending the week early because they are afraid to cast any votes on the Epstein issue. Mike Johnson said he was doing it for fear of re-traumatizing the victims. That's right, because if these victims went through what we think they went through, you reading the names of the powerful men that did it to them is definitely the thing that's going to tip them over the edge. All right, so right now they have acknowledged that this has got them so scared that they have shut down all of Congress. Again, they did what the Democratic Party was not able to do. The Epstein files managed to completely shut down Congress because they're scared to even cast a vote as to what is happening. All right, I want to give you some information with this because Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that nearly all of the calls to her office, this is the most MAGA of MAGA congresswomen. She says that almost all of the calls to her office are about Epstein and demanding that the Epstein files get released. How bad is this? How deeply does it run? Because it is crossing party lines. It is crossing legacy media, independent media, social channels, the darkest of the dark web, message boards. It's everywhere. For perspective, CBS News did a poll. 89% of Americans want the Epstein files released. 89%. And we're going to circle back as to why this matters in just a second. You might have your own reasons, and I want to hear them. 89% of Americans want them released. I want to give you some perspective. We love giving perspective with numbers. 89% of Americans want the Epstein files released. Only 85% of Americans, 85, own a smartphone. More people want the Epstein files released than own a smartphone. 89% of Americans want the Epstein files released. Only 83% of Americans like pizza. That's how little we agree on stuff. All right? A little bit disturbing. Only 85% of Americans say they have warm or kind feelings towards their own mother. More people want the Epstein files released than like their own mother. Coming out just ahead of mom, but not by a lot. Only 86% of Americans say they like dogs and puppies. 89% Epstein file release. 86% puppies. Okay? And possibly tragically, only 84% of Americans say they value democracy. Hence how we've come full circle. So I think some of us could have guessed that one. All right? So this is a huge number. It is not going away. All right. Let's talk about this. Couple of points on this. First of all, let's talk about where it is. One of you asked, is there a chance that we're going to get the files released? Two competing factions, one trying to make that happen, one doing everything they can to make sure it never happens. Let's talk about the ones working together to make it happen. Thomas Massie, who is a Republican from Kentucky, joins a growing list of Republicans in Congress calling for the files to be released. Massie teamed up with Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, and they are trying to force a vote when the House gets back in September. They are recessed for now. They are trying to force a vote that says that the files have to be released. They need 218 votes to make that happen, or 218 signatures on the bill, or whatever the process is to make that happen. For perspective, there are 212 Democrats, assuming they hold the party line, which is a big assumption here. You need 6 Republicans, and more than 12 have already come forward and said, release the files. Now, watch for what's going to happen. This is near the end of July. We're going to have all of August to call congressional representatives and keep the story alive in the media and do social posts and talk about it. Why? I'll tell you in just a second. Why would you want to do that? But follow me here. At the same time, this administration is going to have all of August to try to bully people, silence them, threaten them, bribe them, extort them, etc. Will these Republicans still come back gung-ho for the truth when all is said and done? Part of that rests with us. If we allow the story to die, then it will. And if we keep it going, then there is a strong chance that Congress can compel this documentation to be presented. That's the good news. Let me tell you a little bit about the ick here, which is that it got so bad that 47 said, fine, I'm going to have Bondi release something. And then Bondi said, well, we're not going to actually release anything per se, but we're going to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who is currently behind bars, and who specifically from the Department of Justice is going to do a one-on-one interview with the sole living witness that has been convicted for these heinous crimes. That would be Todd Blanche. Now, Todd Blanche is not someone that many of us have heard of, but somewhere some of you might have some neurons firing. Why is that name familiar? He is one of the next ranking people under Pam Bondi, under the Department of Justice, but he got that position for the help that he offered 47 as his personal defense attorney in a number of situations, including the New York hush money trial involving Stormy Daniels. So this was 47's personal defense attorney. And now out of every human with a law degree, he has been selected to go interview Maxwell one-on-one. Maxwell's attorney has confirmed this. The quote, this is David Oscar Marcus, is Maxwell's attorney. Her attorney says, I can confirm that we are in discussions with the government and that Ghislaine will always testify truthfully. We are grateful to the president for his commitment to uncovering the truth. Woo, I don't know what's about to happen, folks, but it is not the truth. What are the options here? This is a woman who is set to rot in prison optimistically until 2037. And that's if she survives the prison sentence. Is she going to agree to shut up? Is she going to forget some names that may have been involved? Is she going to make up new names and stories about events that maybe she forgot before now? Is she going to disappear to one of these locations where we've been transporting people who are not convicted criminals? Right? Professor Liberty Esquire, I can't believe they would risk her ever talking even if she agreed to shut up. Joe Eclectic wanted me to mention that the president of the Heritage Foundation also just passed away. Thoughts and prayers. She is in danger. I agree, Joe Eclectic, that Ghislaine Maxwell is in danger. So be prepared for what might come next. What does this matter besides idle gossip? What does it matter? Okay, well, first of all, we don't get to choose what takes hold in the media cycle. We talked a little bit about this last week. People are paying attention to this, and for whatever reason, this seems to be a magical spell that is starting to break the hold that he has on some of his more devout, cultish following. It is a division, and that is worth exploring. If it helps people to start to see the light as to who he really is, then just some tips, and we talked about some of this before. We're going to continue talking about this in other videos. When you're talking about someone with a cult mentality that has been followed, or let's not even use extremist language. Let's say you were just suckered, a conned. I don't know if any of you have had a friend, male or female, that has been dating someone that like you knew the whole time that they should not be dating. Maybe they married him, right? And then it finally comes out. Man, how do they feel, right? How do they feel when they got conned? When they were like, how everybody knew they were cheating on me. Everybody knew they were a jerk. Everybody knew that guy never had a job, right? Whatever it is, when you feel suckered, when you feel had, Are you going to talk more about it with the friend that's like, listen, I know that sucks. I'm here for you. Let's talk this out. Let's get, let's go through this together. Or are you going to talk to the friend that's like, yeah, you should have known the whole time. I knew he was a jerk. Let me list for you the reasons. Am I suggesting that you make space in your life for every person that has voted for 47? No, they own their decisions. But if you do have family members or close friends that are starting to show some cracks there, that's an opportunity for a conversation, for what it's worth. Second reason that we should care about the Epstein situation, and these are not in priority order, but it's something that is easy to understand. Bills are not easy to understand. Potential Medicaid cuts that might hurt you, might hurt the hospital, might hurt your senior center. All of that can be confusing. This is not only easy to understand, it's interesting. It's salacious. It involves possible celebrities. It's something that people would watch on a true crime story and have. So if it has their attention, let's use it to show how corruption in this administration and in the halls of power at large have played a role here. But here's the thing. This isn't really about the men on the list. It's about the victims. And more than that, it's about all of the women and girls watching to see if we matter. And we're going to talk a lot more about this moving forward. But right now, the message has been loud and clear that we don't. One second. I think a few more days of the summer cold and I'm good. Okay. These victims have largely been silenced. Some of them have been prosecuted. But if we send the message that if you have enough money and power that you can do whatever you want to women and girls, that is not something that we should cede ground on. I know it can feel like we're past the tipping point already, but this is something worth fighting for. The way we treat women and girls and the way that powerful men are held accountable when they cross that line should still matter. So I believe that's what makes this Epstein case even more important. And for that matter, I want to give a credit to some of the women I've been talking to about this over the last few days who have been counseling me, and they wanted to remind me, and good looking out, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have the Diddy case. We still don't know who those people were that attended those parties and allegedly abused those girls. We had Malcolm Jamal Warner, one of the famous Cosby kids, pass away. And who did CBS choose to interview this morning? Bill Cosby. You couldn't interview Felicia Rashad or Tempest Bledsoe or any of the other cast members. You just looked the other way and put a predator on your camera again. We have ICE that's doing unspeakable things that we know of to the men in detention. What's happening to the women and children who are disappearing at their hand? So this is a big issue that we have an opportunity to shine a light on. And if the glitter of the salaciousness of the Epstein story is enough to get people to look in this direction, then I'll take it. Yeah, I got some reactions from Marlene and Joe Eclectic about the Bill Cosby thing. Yeah, there's a lot. Just think about what we take in a given day, all of us. One of you said this earlier, that it's hard to take in all of this negative news. Joe Eclectic says, just going to keep fighting the good fight. Verna Metzger says, CBS has capitulated. I'm so angry. Yeah, it doesn't feel non-intentional, right? It just doesn't. Jan says, if the victims are able to talk, totally understand. One girl didn't talk. One girl did talk. We do have more victims coming forward. We do have more witnesses coming forward. But let me just be clear here. Like, how someone chooses to handle their trauma, I'm absolutely not judging. But the rest of us should be able to do what we can to elevate the situation. We know the instances happened. People have been convicted multiple times in some cases, as with Epstein in Florida and then the federal case. They've been convicted multiple times. We know it happened. The specifics of who was impacted and how they choose to share their stories are not inconsequential. We know that up to 250 women and girls were abused or worse. And that means that hundreds, if not thousands of men participated. Who are we sitting next to that's on that list? Who did we vote for that was on that list? Who's on a basketball court, football field, baseball field that we're cheering for that's on that list? Who owns a company whose products we're buying and we're funding to keep this cover up because they're on that list? We deserve to know as Americans and as women, right? So we're going to be talking more about this from that perspective. And I'm actually going to be pulling some of you into this little web because this isn't over. I think if people want to talk about Epstein, good, let's have the real conversation. And let's make that conversation about holding predators accountable and sending the signal once and for all that women and girls actually do have value and we are not going to any longer be treated like second-class citizens. That's the energy that I want to bring to this fight. Let the rest of them bicker and hide and run and capitulate, not us. All right. CJ Murphy says this is going to be his Al Capone moment, from your lips to God's ears. Looking at some stuff here, we made it to already 82,000 likes on this lovely Tuesday evening. Amazing. Square Foot Gardening, Professor Liberty Esquire, thank you so much for your support of this programming. Oh, Divine AF Girl, I did not see you log on. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad. We have Joe Eclectic, who sent a bunch of gifts. Punky, Kathy Cat, Robin, Wendy R. Man, Sarah, you've been busy. Johanna Jacobs, Professor Liberty Esquire, Plant-Based Primary, love that. Marlene Willow at 1970. Curious to know if that's about the plant or the character on Buffy. Kay Bruno, BB, the Visionary Girl M. So many people giving us lovely gifts and hearts. Love it so much. I also love that every time I see Punky's name, I don't know if any of you noticed, there's like a bunch of blue hearts in the handle of Punky. So it gives me this lovely, like, heart, heart, heart. Punky has something to say. So Joe Eclectic says all of the perpetrators need to be held accountable. Heaven forbid anyone actually listen to victims. I know. Diane Zoe says Epstein's files were the MAGA mission. They were so sure that Trump would release them. KG, alluding to the Medicare cut, says, I work in hospital finance. 100% cuts are coming. Rural health, labor and delivery will be hit hard. Many people do not understand how a majority of births in this country are funded by the government in some way. I mean, absolutely. Punky says, I want people to know that I am friendly. I love it. I love it. The internet does not convey tone. How could you be mad at Punky with all of these hearts, right? So BB says some preacher and wife just got busted in West Virginia. I don't have any context for that story, but do tell, BB. And then let's see here. Let's see. We can't slip this under the rug. What about the women who participated in this behavior? Yeah, listen, hold everyone accountable, right? There were far more men who participated in this than women, but we found out today, actually, and forgive me for not having his name, but there's a guy who apparently is a race car driver who essentially disappeared from social media for the last 5 years because he kept getting asked questions about his wife, who allegedly was recruiting some of these girls, okay? They just announced a divorce and he's like, I'm coming forward with all of it. We haven't gotten, she's denying everything. These are just accusations. But here's the thing. It is starting to come out. Secrets like this tend to do so. Not always quickly, not always on our timeline, but whoever was saying, like, his followers really did want this released. Some of them, many of them, feel like they are fighting for children in this country. As misguided as some of those attempts might be, and as much as many of them got hustled and conned, and we can have that conversation another day, the bottom line is they thought they were doing this for the right reasons, and now they're waking up to the idea that maybe they were on the wrong side of things, or at the very least, that this story is taking a twist that they might have some trouble stomaching, right? Joe Eclectic says the light is getting under the rock, as they say. And yes, it has gotten horrific. One of you mentioned the abuse in the church. Let me tell you something. We've talked about ICE. We've talked about abuse with those in law enforcement. We mentioned the church abuse. Unfortunately, that is a cross-denominational problem. And now we're talking about politicians and business leaders. Why? Because absolute power and access like that, it breeds corruption. When you have access and you have an entire systemic power structure that will protect you, if you're left unguarded with no consequences, what would you do? And if some of this sounds far-fetched or hard to believe, start doing a dive on how many people have already been found out that had powerful positions that were known to be abusing people. Matt Gaetz, allegedly, right? His crime was not what he allegedly did to young girls. It was getting caught and letting it get messy. That's what the Republican Party punished him for. Many of you might be too young, or maybe didn't follow politics with Hastert, who used to be the Speaker of the House. Have fun Googling. Hastert went to prison for what he did. Alabama almost ran a gubernatorial candidate, Roy Moore, who was known to target teenage girls, right? This is not something that unfortunately is shocking to people who do this all the time, but to the everyday person, it's very shocking to the conscience and it's very difficult to discuss. So the good news is this provides us an opportunity to possibly come at this with a position of power and positivity and expose some of this and maybe make some forward progress once and for all. One of you said, "Oh, how different a world would it be if in U.S. politics if we believed women?" From Anita Hill on. Well, yeah, I mean, we could talk all day about how we never believe women, right? Like we could talk. It starts with Eve and it goes from there. All right. On that note, ask yourselves this, ending on a positive note, do you feel more empowered this evening? Did you feel like this was a good use of your time? How do you feel on this lovely Tuesday night? I know the news is difficult and much of it dark, but I got to tell you, you're making progress. We collectively are starting to turn the tide. Think of how inevitable he seemed just 6 weeks ago. Think of how it seemed like nothing was ever going to stop them from just doing whatever they wanted. Do we still have a huge mountain to climb? Absolutely. And it's going to have some setbacks. But they just had to run and cower in fear from their own legislation because of what's going on. His main issue, he is completely underwater on. And he's so scared that he's picking on late night comedians. This is not a guy who's exercising a position of strength. This is a guy who is scared and he needs any kind of win. So let's make sure that we work together on one single positive solitary goal to make sure none of these SOBs ever get a restful night of sleep ever again. And on that note of good trouble, my fellow political fixers, I hope that you had a good night, that you'll join us next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Political Fixer Live, and keep sending your ideas and your stories and your tips and, of course, your love and encouragement. On behalf of myself and my entire Political Fixer team, thank you so much. Wow, we jumped up to 91,000 likes. Dude, that's amazing. Thank you. And that was with me coughing in your ear. I appreciate you. I'm going to take some cough drops and a little bit of sinus medicine, and I'll be back next week. Jerry, you're welcome. We will keep the pressure on Taco. Absolutely. See you soon, Kathy McGrath. Thank you, Vivian. Really appreciate you. Talk to you all soon.